Hello and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Bill Adolph of the 165th District in Delaware County. As the Majority Appropriations Chairman, it's my job to introduce a budget bill on the House floor and work towards its passage. I thought on today's program it would be interesting to get a view on the budget from the other chamber. Later in this program, we will also talk about job creation and some efforts that we have worked on the legislature to help improve the employment situation in Pennsylvania. Joining me now to discuss the state budget in the Senate is Majority Leader Dominic Pileggi, who represents portions of Chester and Delaware County. Senator Pileggi, welcome to the program.
Happy to be here, Bill.
It's nice to do this program with you, and a lot of times I'm sitting in that chair as a guest of members of the House. The governor has introduced his second budget, and obviously, once again, our job is to try to get a budget done on time, and hopefully with no tax increases, and I don't foresee that. But there's been an awful lot of talk regarding decreases in certain areas of the budget as compared to last year. And I never start talking about this year's budget, Senator, without talking about last year's budget when the state lost about $3 billion in federal stimulus money. And a lot of folks talk about their decreases from last year, but really we put more money into education in state tax dollars than the year before. And I guess my first question to you is, as the Senate Majority Leader, what are you hearing from the state senators regarding the budget throughout the Commonwealth?
Well, you're right. That last year was the sort of starting point, and it was a big change from the previous year. But now, in this second budget proposal by Governor Corbett, our members have some concerns. They are asking questions about, first of all, the framework of the budget. We all agree that we will not be increasing taxes. We will not have new taxes as part of this budget. So we have a certain amount of revenue to spend.
Right.
So the first question is, are the budget projections, which were contained in the governor's February 7th budget address, still accurate now that we have February's collections in hand and March's collections in hand? They seem to be better than anticipated. So maybe the spending number would be different at the end and still not raising taxes.
Right.
But on what they're concerned about, to your direct question, I hear a lot of concern from members in the Senate on both sides of the aisle about higher education funding. I hear a concern about the utilization of the funds that would go to horse breeders and the equine industry, concern about transfer payments to counties for people with difficulties and that need assistance from county mental health agencies. Right. Some concern about some of the impacts of some of the budget constraints at the Department of Public Welfare, to nursing homes, to hospitals, to agencies that deal with our most needy population. They're the kind of concerns that I'm hearing, and I wonder if they're similar to what you're hearing.
Very similar to what the House members are concerned about. Last year we passed a budget roughly about 27.3 and some change. That's $1 billion. This year the governor has introduced a budget at 27.14, slightly under last year's spending plan. We have a little bit of an advantage over the governor because he has to make his budget presentation in early February, so he doesn't have the advantage that we have to take a look down the road a little bit longer. Obviously, February was a little better month than what was projected, and the figures that came in on March just recently were also very good. So, which is a good thing. I mean, this has been a terrible recession. This recovery's been slow, but it was nice to see some revenue coming in over projections. I know we talked last year when we were trying to put last year's budget together, and we used a figure of about 3.5% of increased revenues, and which is not really out of this world coming out of a recession. Let's talk a little bit, if you would, regarding higher education. The governor proposed a 30% decrease for state-related and 20% decrease for the state-owned universities. Westchester being the closest to our area, I guess, as far as the state-owned. Your members are interested in trying to restore some of those cuts?
Absolutely. As you know, your counterpart on our Appropriations Committee, Jay Corman, hails from Center County, the home of Penn State, one of the state-related institutions. And in our backyard, we have Temple, and as a state-related, and Lincoln, whose appropriation wasn't proposed to be changed by the governor as a third state-related. But the Commonwealth's higher education system is the state system that contains locally Cheney, Westchester as examples.
Sure, that's right.
And and it's good for people to remember that Penn State, the University of Pittsburgh, Temple are private institutions that receive a substantial amount of state support, but they're private institutions at their core.
Yes.
The state system schools are our states, state-owned,
we
state-controlled higher education institutions. There's support in both of those camps to try and do what we can, recognizing the difference between those two, and also support for the independent colleges and universities that are so important to so many communities that receive funding through FIA, through institutional assistance grants. That funding was also reduced. So higher education is one of the assets that the Commonwealth has when compared to other states. You go to Montana or North Dakota, you don't have the same variety of educational options in higher education you have here in Pennsylvania. And we need to make sure we're doing the best we can to support those institutions. I think that the commission that my former colleague, Rob Wunderling, is chairing now is going to try and address it from a policy standpoint. At least that's good to have that conversation. But right now, in this year's budget, my members are very interested in seeing if there's any way that we can provide more assistance to the state system schools and also to state-related and independent colleges and universities.
Sure. When you add higher education funding to the funding for K-12, it represents close to 40% of our $27 billion budget. And I know, Senator, you've been a big supporter of education funding for K-12. And what's the chances of the Senate trying to restore some of that accountability block money that has been left out of this budget? I know the superintendents and the school boards kind of like that block grant type of funding. So it gives them a little bit more flexibility and to use the money where they feel their particular school district needs it.
Well, that's been a very successful program, not included in the governor's proposal, something that our members have supported over the years. That originated, if my memory is correct, from the House, from Speaker Smith some years ago. And so there's a lot of support for that program. And I certainly support K through 12 education funding. Our schools really are the foundations of our communities, and we have some excellent schools back in Delaware and Chester counties, excellent school districts, some that are having some trouble and need some help, which is another discussion.
Yes.
But on the whole, most of our schools are doing very well, and we need to support them where we can.
Yeah. The whole education funding issue receives an awful lot of press, and because we have 500 school districts in Pennsylvania. Obviously, Philadelphia being the largest, to some very small rural school districts, and the funding formula is different for each one. We appropriate the money, and then based upon this formula, the poorer school districts receive more state funding than the wealthier school districts, but we don't have control whatsoever of any of their budgets.
True.
So it makes for a funny and sometimes a very difficult situation. But I do believe we will try to do our best as long as we have the money. It's not as if we're sitting on a pile of cash up here. Our state revenues are still, not keeping up with the spending aspect of education. So we'll try to do our best there. Let's talk a little bit about the Department of Public Welfare. And Senator, I felt for a long time that the welfare spending, which is our fastest growing aspect of our budget, sometimes is treated negatively when it really should not. And there's some programs that I think we slowed down their spending last year, and we may start eliminating some of those programs. However, included in that big department is some very, very important health lines, which sometimes gets criticized because they come under that word welfare, and that's kind of a negative tone out there. But all our hospital funding, Medicare funding, Medicaid funding, a lot of our MR funding, and the governor's proposal is to once again do this block grant style. There were 7 categorical grants that the counties would receive from the state, and there were strings attached to each one of those grants, and as long as they spend that money in that category, it was fine. But sometimes they would run out in this category and have some money left over here, but they could not transfer that money. And the governor's proposal is to just send them a block grant, use it how you want to use it. However, there's a 20% decrease in that funding. And have you been hearing from the county commissioners or our Delaware County Council on this proposition?
I have, and I think the counties, both of my counties, appreciate the block grant approach. They don't appreciate the 20% reduction,
right?
And would like to see if we can take some of that pain out of that reduction that's been proposed. But the flexibility is something that counties and school districts, local governments have been looking for. I think it's a good approach. Conceptually, we need to work through the details. And you're right about the public welfare. People think of welfare as food stamps and cash assistance to people, but the bulk of the money we're spending is for medical care in hospitals, doctors' offices, nursing homes.
That's correct.
And people should know the fastest growing part of that budget is the population of seniors that are in nursing homes, many of them after leading a full life of employment, successful middle-class existence,
right.
And at some point they spend their assets and end up receiving Medicaid in a nursing home. And most people don't think of that as welfare, but that's part of the spending in the Department of Public Welfare. A lot of seniors receiving Medicaid in nursing homes.
Yeah, no question about that. And a lot of people, when they hear that word welfare, they think exactly a cash grant or food stamps and so forth. And there was definitely some abuse
right.
In those systems. And I think last year, we used the Auditor General's audits. We didn't take a hatchet to the budget. We actually had facts and figures together, and we decreased that spending based upon what we saw in those audits. And I think Secretary Alexander, considering the job that he was asked to do, has done a very good job in his first 12 months. But this year, you just can't go to the secretary and say, hey, listen, we got to decrease spending in this area, because, like you said, we're talking about nursing homes, we're talking about hospitals, and I've met, and the healthcare industry, Senator, in our area is probably one of the leading industries, if not the largest employer in our area. So I know Crozier-Chester Medical Center has 4 or 5 hospitals in our area, and all the doctors' offices that surround each of those hospitals. So, and healthcare is, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. So, it's very important. Let's take a short break. Legislative report. We'll return in a moment.
Did you know that Act 16 of 1999 honors one of the greatest leaders in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives? The Matthew J. Ryan Legislative Office Building, once known as the Capitol Annex, is located next to the main Capitol building and honors the late Speaker of the House, Matthew J. Ryan. Those who visit this building will observe the magnificent architectural designs providing eloquence and grandeur to the building. Known as one of the greatest members in the history of the Pennsylvania State House, Matthew Ryan started his career in the legislature in 1963 and was elected Speaker in 1981. His charisma and knowledge will forever be reflected in the building now named after this great legislative leader. Now you know.
Did you know that in the corridors in the first floor of the capital of Pennsylvania, there are nearly 400 individual mosaics? The idea for creating these intricate tiles was first suggested by Henry C. Mercer in 1902. A year later, he received the commission to prove 16,000 square feet of pavement tiles for the Great Rotunda and corridors of the new state capitol building in Harrisburg. Mercer set about designing subjects for approximately 400 mosaics. He chose as his general theme the history of Pennsylvania, and he soon realized that his tiles could tell stories. Although the arrangement seems random, the mosaics are very thoughtfully placed in the floor. The tile sequence is roughly chronological, beginning at one end with the scenes depicting the Native Americans. The mosaics progress into the story of European habitation in the New World and encompass the Commonwealth's triumph through process and intervention. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. I'm State Representative Bill Adolph. I'm pleased to have Senate Majority Leader Dominic Pileggi as my guest. He's here with me, and we just had a short conversation about the state budget. Now I want to talk a little bit about job creation and some important legislation. Senator Pileggi has sponsored legislation that's passed both the chambers and signed recently into law Act 16 of 2012. First of all, congratulations on your legislative accomplishment.
Thank you.
And could you tell the viewers a little bit about Act 16?
Sure. The legislation is commonly referred to as a KOZ legislation or Keystone Opportunity Zone legislation. And what it does, simply stated, is permit local communities to exempt an area of their community from local taxes, school taxes, county taxes, municipal taxes. And if they do that and the Department of Community and Economic Development approves the application, that area will also be exempt from state taxes. So that's a tremendous incentive for companies to come in, locate there, and to employ more Pennsylvanians. Usually the criteria is those properties have to have some contamination or some problem. They have to be under some form of stress generally. So you're not taking prime real estate and just taking it off the tax roll. So there's certain criteria to protect it, but local community has to vote, both the school board, the county, and the local municipality to exempt the property from taxes. One of the ways that we got the ethane cracker in western Pennsylvania was to offer those benefits to Shell as an incentive for them to come to Pennsylvania. Hundreds of millions of dollars, if not in excess of $1 billion, thousands of jobs. So it's proven to be a pretty effective tool.
Yeah. You know, a lot of times the governor and this administration is accused of not being out there promoting Pennsylvania enough and so forth. But I do know that they work very hard behind the scenes. No one's going to go to the microphone as much as the former governor used to, but I know this administration is working quietly to benefit the people of Pennsylvania, trying to bring jobs into the state, which you can't have a job unless you have a company there. And this cracker out in western part of the state, how many jobs do you believe that's going to come bring into the Commonwealth?
The construction jobs will be well over 1,000 permanent jobs and ancillary jobs, and measured in the thousands, because it's the type of industry that has the need for supporting companies and could be supportive of additional development down the road. It's a fundamental building block for an economy based on chemicals and byproducts.
Sure. Now, head back to our area. You know, obviously, we're all concerned with the possible loss of 3 oil refineries, their closings, and the loss of thousands of jobs, and what it will do to the economy in southeast Pennsylvania, Delaware County, Chester County, so forth. How will this legislation impact the search for companies to purchase the oil refineries?
Well, it gives us a tool to use to attract people who would be interested in opening those refineries as refineries and taking over ownership and operation, or some other related use that would keep people working on the site. So this will be part of the package that's offered, and I can tell you that it's a great concern to me, as I'm sure it is to you, that we do everything we can to get the Sunoco and the ConocoPhillips refineries reopened and reoperating, either as refineries or some other labor-intensive use, so we can get those people back to work there.
Sure, Dominic. During the House Appropriations Committee meetings, in interviewing Secretary Walker, Walker informed the committee that he thought that the state would be able to find buyers for at least 2 out of the 3 refineries, which you know, I was all smiles that day when he said that. And of course, you know, he's not able to talk about it freely, but I do feel confident that we're going to be able to reopen you know, 2 out of the 3 refineries possibly, and convert the one that isn't sold to some other type of industry. And obviously, both chambers worked very hard in trying to with the Marcellus shale industry and this natural gas industry. And there's going to be pipelines coming down to the southeast, and obviously we have a natural resource right there in the Delaware River. So I think we're going to be able to put whatever property is not sold as a refinery. And I know you attended many meetings, as I did, and you know, some of those refineries were outdated and so forth, and that's why no one's knocking down the door to buy them. And but I do have faith in this administration that they're working behind the scenes, and with legislation that you passed and that I supported in the House, we're going to be able to find buyers for those at least 2 out of the 3 refineries, and hopefully start a new industry in the southeast, whether it's the natural gas and the way it was explained to me at various meetings, the construction jobs are going to be there no matter what industry comes in there. And no, it's not permanent, but what construction job is permanent? But it's going to be good for the area. What's on the agenda in the Senate between now and June 30th, other than the budget? Is there any legislation that Senate members are working on that you would like to see become law sometime in this term?
Well, we are working very hard on the unemployment compensation fund imbalance, which has sort of been pushed out of the news lately, but we have a serious imbalance in our unemployment compensation fund because of the chronic high unemployment. We have to rebalance that fund. It's going to require concessions and compromise from all parties involved in that fund. That's something that I have targeted to complete before we finish the budget process and break post-budget. So that's one. And another major issue that impacts all school districts and parents and children across the Commonwealth is charter school reform. That's an issue that has been causing friction between school districts and charter schools. We should be working to substantially change the charter school enabling law to eliminate that friction, to make sure that there is transparency in the operation of the charter schools, that people have confidence in those schools continuing to operate as public schools. And then we have a major rewrite of the open records law that we're trying to move through the Senate to the House so that you can have a look at it and try and finish that this year. So there are three major items that we hope to have running alongside the main show, which is the budget process, which is the critical matter that we have to finish by June 30th.
Yeah, we could do a whole legislative report on each one of those items, you know, but obviously all three are very important. And the unemployment is a result of obviously high unemployment throughout the nation. In Pennsylvania, you know, we had very high unemployment. It's starting to drop now, which is a good sign. But we actually ran out of money, is that correct, in our unemployment fund, and we were forced to borrow. And now we have the liability of paying back the federal government, and how do we go about that? And that's the crux of your legislation.
That's the crux of the problem. And up until this year, that loan from the federal government to Pennsylvania and other states was interest-free. This year, that loan is starting to accrue some interest. So we have to get ahead of that problem. We think we have a plan, but we have to work through the details and make sure we get as much of a consensus as we can on moving forward. But it's something we need to have finished this summer, this late spring.
Right. The charter school legislation is very important, and we have an awful lot of debates in the House regarding the charter school legislation. Some of the school districts feel that they are reimbursing the charter school too much, and the charter school says they're not getting enough. So somehow or another, we have to find out what that right number is. And there's special education students that are involved here as well. So very complicated stuff, but I'm sure we'll improve the situation. But there is a tense situation out there between the school boards and the charter school family. The last that you talked about is the right to know, and you should be congratulated in taking Pennsylvania out of the dark ages and putting us, if not the best right to know law in the nation, one of the best. And
I'm a little biased, so I think it is the best. But
all right. But now that I have you here, I think it would be much improved if we had an amendment or two, and this comes from our tax collectors, and you know the issues. Some commercial folks are taking advantage of the law, and it's very demanding on time and money for some of our local municipalities to provide some of this information to these commercial outfits. So, and I know I've talked to you about it in the past, and I've talked to the executive director of our Right to Know department. So, hopefully,
that is one of the items that we're going to try and incorporate into the amendment to the law. What we refer to as the commercial use problem, where people are simply taking advantage of a law that was really designed for ordinary citizens and the press to access government records, not to turn governments into sales lead sources for marketing and businesses. That really wasn't the intent.
Yeah. Well, I know it wasn't the intent, but some folks always try to find a way, and they did. Senator, I want to thank you for being with me today, and that's all the time we have for today's program. If you have any comments or questions about these or any other legislative topics, my contact information will be on the screen in a moment. Thanks for watching, and join me again for Legislative Report.